The alarm bells rang through the corridors of the starship Stellar Dawn at exactly 0800 hours. Commander Taejin rushed from his quarters, still buttoning his uniform jacket. His boots clicked against the metal floors as he made his way to the main docking bay. Today was inspection day, and he knew how important this was for his crew. The Interstellar Health Organization had sent their best team to check his ship. These inspections happened every 6 months and usually went smoothly. Taejin had been commanding starships for 15 years and had never failed an inspection. His crew was professional and his ship was clean. He expected today to be just another routine check, but something felt different this time. The inspection team that came aboard looked more serious than usual. There were 5 alien beings instead of the normal 3. Their equipment looked newer and more advanced. The lead inspector was a tall crystalline creature called Veltar who spoke in musical tones that his translator turned into basic galactic common. Tae-Jin watched as the inspection team spread out across his ship. They carried scanning devices that beeped and hummed as they moved through each section. The kitchen passed inspection easily. The engine room got a quick approval. The medical bay received high marks from the alien doctors. Everything was going perfectly until they reached the crew quarters. Dr. Hai-1 was following the inspection team as the ship's medical officer. She had prepared for weeks, making sure everything was clean and organized. Her medical records were perfect and her equipment was sterilized. She felt confident that her sections would pass with flying colors. The inspectors had been nodding approvingly at everything they saw. Then something went wrong. VL-Tar stopped suddenly in the middle of the crew quarters hallway. His crystalline body began to glow with a red light that Taejin had never seen before. The other inspectors immediately gathered around him as his scanning device started making loud warning sounds. The beeping got faster and louder until it sounded like a fire alarm. The inspection team began speaking rapidly in their own languages. Taejin could hear panic in their voices even through the translator. Dr. Hai-1 moved closer to see what was happening. The scanner in Veltar's hands was pointing toward the boot storage area where the crew kept their personal footwear. Sergeant Minho appeared from around the corner. He was a big man with kind eyes who had served on the Stellar Dawn for 3 years. Everyone liked him because he was always ready to help and never complained about difficult assignments. He saw the commotion and hurried over to see if he could assist. The moment Minho got close to the inspection team, Veltar's scanner went completely crazy. The red lights flashed so bright that everyone had to shield their eyes. The warning sounds became so loud that crew members started coming out of their rooms to see what was happening. The other inspectors backed away from Minho like he was carrying some terrible disease. Dr. Hai-1 checked her own medical scanner, but it showed nothing unusual. Minho looked perfectly healthy to her. His vital signs were normal and he showed no signs of sickness or contamination. She could not understand why the alien equipment was reacting so strongly to his presence. Veltar finally managed to speak through his translator. His musical voice sounded shaky and frightened. He pointed directly at Minho's feet and said something that made everyone freeze. The words came out slowly and clearly through the translation device. Class-3 Biohazard detected. The entire hallway went silent. A Class-3 biohazard was one of the most serious contamination levels in galactic law. It meant that something was present that could cause widespread damage across multiple star systems. Ships with Class-3 violations were immediately quarantined and their crews faced serious legal consequences. Commander Taejin felt his heart racing. He had never dealt with anything like this before. He looked at Minho, who seemed just as confused as everyone else. The sergeant was wearing his standard-issue combat boots that looked completely normal. They were black leather with metal eyelets and thick rubber soles. Nothing about them seemed dangerous or unusual. The inspection team was now wearing emergency protective gear that they had pulled from their equipment cases. They approached Minho's boots like they were dealing with a nuclear weapon. Their scanners continued to beep and flash as they got closer to his feet. One of the inspectors was taking readings from a safe distance while the others prepared. Containment equipment. Dr. High 1 stepped forward and demanded an explanation. She was responsible for the medical safety of the entire ship and needed to know what kind of threat they were dealing with. Her scanner still showed nothing dangerous, but she trusted the advanced alien technology. If they said there was a biohazard, then something serious was happening. VL Tar explained through his translator that his equipment was detecting massive biological contamination concentrated in the area around Minho's boots. The readings showed thousands of different life forms that should not exist together in one place. The scanner was identifying genetic material from dozens of different planets, all mixed together in a way that violated several galactic health regulations. The crew members who had gathered to watch began to back away nervously. Nobody wanted to be near a Class-3 biohazard. Minho looked down at his boots with confusion and worry. He had worn these same boots on countless missions and had never had any problems. They were comfortable and reliable and had carried him safely through many dangerous situations. Commander Taejin asked the obvious question. How could a pair of military boots pose such a serious threat? They were made of standard materials and had been issued by the human military. Thousands of soldiers wore identical boots throughout the galaxy. If these boots were dangerous, then there should have been reports of problems from other ships and stations. The inspection team began setting up a containment field around Minho's feet. They worked quickly and efficiently, like they had dealt with this kind of emergency before. Their equipment created a glowing barrier that separated the sergeant from the rest of the crew. The scanners continued to beep, but the warning sounds became less urgent once the containment field was active. VL Tar informed Commander Taejin that the entire ship would need to be quarantined until they could determine the full extent of the contamination. No crew members would be allowed to leave and no supplies could be brought aboard. The Stellar Dawn was effectively trapped in space until the biohazard could be resolved. Dr. High 1 felt a cold fear settling in her stomach. A quarantine could last for months or even years depending on what they found. The crew would be stuck on the ship with limited supplies and no contact with the outside galaxy. Their families would not know what happened to them. Their careers would be destroyed if they were found responsible for a serious health violation. Min-Ho stood perfectly still inside the containment field. He did not want to make the situation worse by moving around. His boots suddenly felt heavy and strange on his feet. These faithful companions that had carried him through swamps and deserts and alien forests were now being treated like deadly weapons. He wondered what could possibly be living inside them that was causing such panic among the inspectors. The inspection team worked through the night taking samples and running tests. The crew watched from a safe distance as more and more equipment was brought from the inspection ship. It was clear that this was not going to be resolved quickly or easily. The routine inspection had become a major crisis that could affect the entire human space program. Commander Taejin stood watching the activity and wondered how a simple pair of combat boots could threaten the safety of multiple star systems. His ship was clean and his crew was healthy. Yet somehow they were facing the most serious biohazard classification in galactic law. The answers would come, but first they had to survive the investigation that would determine the fate of everyone. Aboard the Stellar Dawn, Communications Officer So Young was monitoring all transmissions from the inspection ship when she intercepted something that made her blood run cold. The alien inspection team was sending encrypted messages directly to the Galactic Council, bypassing normal channels. She had never seen this level of security for a routine health inspection. Using her advanced decryption skills, So Young managed to break through the alien encryption codes. What she found in those messages would change everything. The crew thought they knew about their situation. The hybrid organisms in Minho's boots were not just a contamination problem. They were a potential gold mine that could revolutionize agriculture across the galaxy. The intercepted messages revealed that the alien scientists had been running tests on the boot samples for days. They had discovered that some of the hybrid organisms could grow in environments that would kill normal plants. Desert worlds that had been barren for millions of years could potentially be turned into gardens using these new life forms. Other hybrid creatures had developed natural resistance to diseases that had been destroying alien crops for centuries. The combination of genetic material from different worlds had created organisms that could fight off infections that no single species could survive. Food production could increase dramatically if these discoveries were properly developed, but the messages also contained warnings that terrified the alien governments. The same organisms that could save dying worlds could also destroy healthy ecosystems if they got out of control. The hybrid creatures might be able to outcompete natural species and take over entire planets, turning them into something completely different. So Young realized that the Galactic Council was facing an impossible decision. They could try to destroy all the hybrid organisms and ban humans from space to prevent future contamination. Or they could try to study and control these new life forms while risking catastrophic ecological disasters if something went wrong. She brought her findings to Commander Taejin, who immediately called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. The crew gathered in the main conference room while Minho remained in his containment field connected by video link. The weight of the situation was becoming clear to everyone aboard the Stellar. Dawn.Dr. Hai-1 explained that the hybrid organisms were unlike anything known to galactic science. Evolution normally took millions of years to produce new species, but the conditions inside human boots had compressed that process into months or years. The organisms were changing and adapting at rates that seemed impossible. Engineer Du Hyun had been analyzing the ship's records and made a disturbing discovery. Every human vessel in the space fleet probably contained similar biological cargo. Military ships, exploration vessels, and trade craft had all been carrying these hybrid ecosystems without knowing it. The contamination was not limited to one pair of boots or one ship. The implications were staggering. If the Galactic Council decided that human boots were too dangerous, then the entire human space program would need to be shut down. Every ship would need to be quarantined and decontaminated. Thousands of personnel would be stranded in space while their equipment was destroyed or sterilized, but there was another possibility that was even more frightening. Some of the intercepted messages suggested that certain alien species wanted to weaponize the hybrid organisms. They saw the potential for biological warfare that could devastate enemy planets while leaving their own worlds untouched. The crew began to understand that they were sitting on a discovery that could either unite the galaxy in scientific cooperation or tear it apart in a war over biological weapons. The simple act of walking on alien planets had turned humans into unwitting creators of the most powerful organisms in known space. Minho listened to the discussions with growing horror. His faithful boots had become the center of a galactic crisis that could end human expansion into space forever. He had warned them on peaceful missions to help build colonies and explore new worlds. Now they were being discussed as potential weapons of mass destruction. Botanist Ji Woo had been studying the latest samples and made another shocking discovery. The hybrid organisms were not just surviving in the boots, they were actively communicating with each other. Chemical signals were being passed between different species, allowing them to coordinate their activities and share resources. This meant that the ecosystem inside the boots was more complex than anyone had imagined. It was not just a collection of random organisms, but a functioning biological network that was working together to survive and evolve. The implications for galactic biology were revolutionary. Communications Officer So Young intercepted another transmission that revealed the Galactic Council was splitting into factions. The peaceful agricultural species wanted to study the organisms and develop their beneficial properties. The military species saw them as a threat that needed to be eliminated. The scientific species were fascinated by the evolutionary possibilities. Some species were demanding that all human ships be immediately quarantined and their crews imprisoned until the contamination could be contained. Others were calling for emergency research programs to study the organisms before they were destroyed. A few militant groups were suggesting that humans had been conducting biological warfare and should face severe punishment. The crew of the Stellar Dawn realized they were at the center of a political crisis that could reshape the entire galaxy. Their routine inspection had uncovered a discovery that challenged everything the alien species thought they knew about biology and evolution. Commander Taejin made a difficult decision. He would need to contact Earth Command and inform them of the situation. The human government needed to prepare for the possibility that their entire space program was about to be shut down. They also needed to decide how to respond to accusations that they had been conducting biological warfare, the fate of human space. Exploration hung in the balance as the various alien species debated what to do with this unexpected discovery. The crew could only wait and hope that cooler heads would prevail and that some solution could be found that would allow them to continue their mission of peaceful exploration. Dr. Haiwan continued her research knowing that the scientific data she collected might be the key to saving the human space program. Every discovery about the hybrid organisms could potentially be used to demonstrate their beneficial properties and convince the galaxy that they were worth studying rather than destroying. As the third day of quarantine began, the crew prepared for whatever decision the Galactic Council would make about their fate and the fate of all humans in space. Captain Nari had been awakened from her sleep cycle when the emergency communication came through from Earth Command. As the ship's chief diplomatic officer, she was being called to handle the most important negotiation in human space history. The Galactic Council had agreed to hear arguments before making their final decision about the boot contamination crisis. She had only 6 hours to prepare for a meeting that could determine whether humans would ever be allowed in space again. The council chamber was being set up on the neutral station at Alpha Centauri with representatives from 47 different species. Each faction had already made their position clear, and most of them wanted humans banned from galactic space permanently. Nari studied the files that Dr. Haiwan had compiled about the hybrid organisms. The scientific data was impressive, but she knew that fear and politics would be more important than facts in the coming negotiations. The alien species were terrified of biological contamination and wanted simple solutions to complex problems. The first faction to present their case was the agricultural coalition led by a species called the Vortani. They were tall plant-like beings who had been struggling with crop failures for decades. Their representative spoke through a translator that turned their chemical signals into words that other species could understand. They argued that the hybrid organisms could solve hunger problems across the galaxy. Their preliminary tests showed that some of the boot samples could grow food in environments that had been barren for millennia. Desert worlds could become breadbaskets and frozen planets could support life if these organisms were properly developed, but the military defense alliance disagreed strongly. Their representative was a heavily armored creature called General Thok who had fought in several galactic wars. He declared that humans had been conducting biological warfare, whether they knew it or not. The hybrid organisms were weapons that could destroy entire ecosystems and needed to be eliminated immediately. The Scientific Research Federation took a middle position. They wanted to study the organisms in controlled laboratory conditions before making any decisions about their future. Their representative, Dr. XEL-9, argued that destroying such unique life forms would be a tragedy for galactic science. Captain Nari listened to each faction present their arguments before standing to address the council. She knew that human space exploration hung in the balance and that one wrong word could end their presence in the galaxy forever. The chamber fell silent as she began to speak. She started by acknowledging that humans had made a serious mistake by not realizing the biological cargo they were carrying. The contamination was accidental, but that did not make it less dangerous. She accepted full responsibility on behalf of the human space program and promised that they would do everything possible to address the problem, but she also argued that destroying the organisms would be a waste of an incredible opportunity. The hybrid life forms represented millions of years of evolution compressed into a few short years. They could hold the key to solving problems that had plagued the galaxy for centuries, including food shortages and environmental disasters. The negotiations became heated when the isolationist faction demanded that all human ships be immediately quarantined and their crews imprisoned. They were led by a species called the Zektari who had been attacked by biological weapons in the past. They refused to take any chances with what they saw as a clear threat to galactic security. Nari countered by proposing a joint research initiative where humans and aliens would work together to study the organism safely. She suggested that the discoveries could benefit everyone if they were properly controlled and developed. The key was cooperation, not isolation. The debates continued for hours as different species argued about the best way to handle the crisis. Some wanted to destroy everything connected to the contamination, including the human ships that carried it. Others saw the potential benefits and wanted to develop the organisms for peaceful purposes. General Thok accused humans of lying about the accidental nature of the contamination. He claimed that no species could be so careless as to carry biological weapons between worlds without knowing it. He demanded that human military personnel be court-martialed for their role in the crisis. Dr. Zel-9 defended the humans by pointing out that their enclosed footwear was unique among galactic species. Most aliens either had natural foot protection or wore minimal covering that did not create the sealed environment that boots provided. The contamination was a result of human biology, not human malice. The Agricultural Coalition proposed a compromise where humans would be allowed to continue space operations but only under strict supervision. All human vessels would carry alien observers who would monitor their activities and ensure that proper decontamination procedures were followed. Nari realized that the negotiations were not going well. Too many species were afraid of the unknown and wanted simple solutions to complex problems. She needed to find a way to demonstrate that humans could be trusted to handle this responsibility properly. She made a dramatic gesture by volunteering to have Minho's boots publicly destroyed if that would help build trust. The sergeant had already agreed to surrender his footwear for the good of the human space program. His sacrifice could show that humans were willing to cooperate fully with galactic authorities. The offer seemed to soften some of the opposition, but General Thok remained unconvinced. He demanded that all human personnel submit to biological testing and that their ships be searched for additional contamination. He also wanted humans to pay reparations for the potential damage their organisms could cause. The Scientific Research Federation proposed a different approach. They suggested creating a joint research facility where the organisms could be studied safely while new protocols were developed for human space operations. The facility would be staffed by scientists from multiple species and would share all discoveries with the galactic community. As the negotiations entered their second day, it became clear that no easy solution would be found. The different factions had conflicting interests and none of them were willing to compromise significantly. The fate of human space exploration would depend on finding a creative solution that addressed everyone's concerns. Captain Nari knew that she needed to find a way to turn the crisis into an opportunity. The hybrid organisms were not just a threat, they were a potential benefit that could improve life for species across the galaxy. The challenge was convincing the Council to see past their fears and embrace the possibilities. The negotiations continued, with each faction presenting new arguments and counterarguments. The chamber was filled with tension as species debated the future of human space exploration and the fate of the most unique biological discovery in galactic history. Dr. could not sleep that night. The quarantine had been in effect for 18 hours and she still did not understand what was happening. The alien inspection team had sealed off the crew quarters and was working around the clock to analyze Minho's boots. Their equipment hummed and beeped constantly as they ran test after test on the mysterious contamination. She decided to start her own investigation in the ship's medical lab. As the chief medical officer, she had the right to examine any potential health threats to her crew. She pulled up Minho's service record on her computer and began studying his mission history. What she found made her eyes widen with surprise. Sergeant Minho had been on 47 different planetary missions in the past 3 years. He had walked through jungles on Kepler 442b and across frozen tundra on Proxima Centauri C. His boots had touched the red sands of Mars and the purple crystals of Vega. Prime, every single mission had taken him to worlds with completely different environments and life forms. Dr. Haiwan realized that Minho's boots were like a traveling museum of alien life. Each planet had left microscopic traces in the leather and rubber. Spores from fungal forests had settled in the creases. Bacteria from alien swamps had found homes in the dark spaces between the soul and upper material. Seeds from unknown plants had wedged themselves into the tread's dot. She contacted the ship's botanist Ji Wu, who specialized in alien plant life. Together, they requested permission from the inspection team to examine some of the samples they had collected. Veltar was hesitant at first, but agreed when Dr. Haiwan explained that they might be able to help solve the mystery faster. Under the microscope, the samples revealed an amazing sight. The boot material contained a complete ecosystem that had been building for years. Every time Minho stepped on a new planet, his boots collected living specimens. The warm, dark environment inside military boots had created perfect conditions for these organisms to survive the journey between worlds. But something incredible had happened during those long space flights. The different alien life forms had begun to interact with each other in ways that should have been impossible. Jiwoo found plant cells that had combined with bacterial colonies to create hybrid organisms that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Animal DNA had merged with fungal spores to produce new forms of life that defied scientific classification. The boots had become a biological laboratory where evolution was happening at an accelerated rate. Species that had never met in nature were learning to work together. Bacteria from desert worlds had taught moisture-loving organisms how to survive in dry conditions. Cold-resistant fungi had shared their survival strategies with tropical plant matter. Dr. Haiwan made detailed notes as she studied sample after sample. Each slide revealed new combinations of life that should not exist. The genetic material showed clear signs of horizontal gene transfer between completely different types of organisms. It was as if the boots had created their own rules of biology that ignored the normal barriers between species. The inspection team's equipment had detected this biological chaos and classified it as a threat. From their perspective, the boots contained potentially dangerous organisms that could disrupt natural ecosystems if released into the wrong environment. The hybrid creatures might be able to survive in conditions that would kill normal life forms, making them impossible to control. Jiwoo discovered that some of the combined organisms had developed abilities that could be either beneficial or devastating. She found bacterial colonies that could break down plastic waste and turn it into fertile soil. Other hybrid creatures could grow in pure sand and produce oxygen at rates that exceeded any known plant. The possibilities were both exciting and terrifying. Commander Taejin joined the investigation when he learned about the discoveries. He brought engineer Du Hyan, who specialized in environmental systems, aboard Starships. Together they realized that this contamination was not unique to Minho's boots. Every human who had walked on alien planets was probably carrying similar biological cargo. The implications were staggering. Human space exploration had been accidentally conducting the largest cross-planetary biological survey in galactic history. Every boot, every shoe, every piece of equipment that had touched alien soil was potentially carrying hybrid organisms that could revolutionize science or destroy entire ecosystems. Du Hyan pulled up records from other human ships and found similar reports that had been dismissed as minor contamination. Maintenance crews had reported strange growths in boot storage areas. Medical officers had noted unusual bacterial readings near crew quarters. Environmental systems had detected unidentified organic compounds that were assumed to be harmless. The human space program had been creating these mobile laboratories for decades without realizing it. While other species wore minimal foot protection or had natural barriers that prevented contamination, humans had developed enclosed footwear that was perfect for preserving and mixing alien life forms. Dr. Haiwan realized that the warm, moist environment inside combat boots was ideal for biological activity. The constant movement during planetary missions mixed the different organisms together. The long periods of storage during space travel gave them time to adapt and evolve. Each mission added new ingredients to the biological soup that was brewing. In thousands of pairs of human boots, the discovery explained why the inspection team had been so alarmed. From their perspective, humans were walking biological weapons that could accidentally terraform entire planets. The hybrid organisms might be harmless in controlled laboratory conditions but could become invasive species if released into natural environments. As news of the investigation spread through the ship, the crew began to understand the magnitude of the situation. They were not just dealing with a simple contamination problem. They had stumbled onto a discovery that could change the relationship between all species in the galaxy. The question was whether this discovery would be seen as a threat or an opportunity. Minho remained in the containment field watching the scientists work. His boots had become the center of a galactic controversy that could end human space exploration forever. The simple footwear that had carried him safely through countless dangers had become more dangerous than any weapon he had ever faced. The investigation continued through the second night as more samples were analyzed and more hybrid organisms were discovered. Each finding added to the growing understanding that human boots were not just carrying contamination. They were creating entirely new forms of life that had never existed before in the galaxy. HFY compiled her findings into a detailed report that would be transmitted to the Galactic Council. The fate of human space exploration would depend on how the alien governments chose to respond to this unexpected revelation about the biological cargo that humans had been carrying between worlds. Young scientist Ruwan had just graduated from the Earth Space Academy 3 months ago and was serving her first assignment aboard the Stellar Dawn. She had been following the negotiations with growing frustration as the different alien factions argued about what to do with the hybrid organisms. As a recent graduate, she had studied the latest developments in biological containment and had an idea that might solve everyone's problems. She requested permission to address the Galactic Council, which was unusual for such a junior officer. Captain Nari was desperate for new ideas and agreed to let her speak. The council chamber fell silent as the young scientist activated her holographic presentation showing detailed technical diagrams. Route 1 explained that the problem was not the organisms themselves but the lack of control over their spread. Instead of destroying them or banning human space travel, she proposed creating specialized containment systems that could safely manage the biological cargo while allowing continued research and development. Her solution involved retrofitting all human ships with biological processing chambers where boots and other equipment could be safely decontaminated between planetary missions. The collected organisms would not be destroyed but would be preserved and cataloged for scientific study. This would transform the contamination problem into a research opportunity. The processing chambers would use advanced scanning technology to identify and separate different types of organisms. Beneficial species could be cultivated in controlled environments, while potentially dangerous ones could be safely contained. The chambers would also monitor the evolution of hybrid organisms and track their development over time. Zel9 from the Scientific Research Federation was immediately interested in the proposal. The technology would allow them to study evolution in real time and possibly develop new applications for the hybrid organisms. The research potential was enormous if the system could be implemented safely, but General Thok remained skeptical. He demanded to know how the containment systems would prevent the organisms from escaping and contaminating other worlds. The military faction needed guarantees that the biological material would not be used as weapons or accidentally released into the environment. Ruwan had anticipated this concern and had designed multiple backup systems into her proposal. Each processing chamber would be equipped with emergency sterilization capabilities that could destroy all biological material in case of containment failure. The chambers would also be monitored by automated systems that would alert authorities if anything went wrong. The Agricultural Coalition was excited by the possibilities the system offered. They could work with human scientists to develop beneficial organisms for use on their own worlds. The controlled environment would allow them to test new applications safely before implementing them on a larger scale. Commander, Taejin supported the proposal by offering to make the Stellar Dawn the first test vessel for the new containment system. His crew was already dealing with the contamination crisis and would be ideal subjects for testing the new technology. The success or failure of the system could be evaluated under real conditions. The negotiations took a positive turn as the different factions began to see the benefits of Ruan's proposal. Instead of viewing the hybrid organisms as a threat, they could be seen as a valuable resource that could benefit everyone. The key was developing proper controls and safety measures. Engineer Du Hyun worked with the alien technical experts to refine the containment system design. They added features that would allow different species to monitor the biological processing and ensure that their safety concerns were addressed. The system would be transparent and subject to regular inspections. The Scientific Research Federation proposed establishing a joint research institute where scientists from multiple species could study the organisms together. The institute would be funded by contributions from all member species and would share its discoveries freely with the galactic community. Sergeant Min-ho volunteered to be the first test subject for the new system. His boots would be processed through the prototype containment chamber while he wore new experimental footwear designed to prevent future contamination. His cooperation impressed the alien delegates who had been suspicious of human intentions. The military defense alliance gradually warmed to the idea. When they realized that the containment system could actually improve galactic security by monitoring and controlling biological contamination, they could prevent the accidental spread of dangerous organisms while maintaining the benefits of scientific research. Captain Nari saw that the negotiations were moving in the right direction and pressed for a formal agreement. She proposed a trial period where the containment system would be tested on a small number of human vessels while the Joint Research Institute was established. The results would determine whether the system could be expanded to the entire human fleet. The isolationist faction remained opposed to any compromise, but their influence was weakening as other species saw the potential benefits of the proposal. The fear of biological contamination was being replaced by excitement about the research possibilities. Dr. Haiwon presented additional data about the beneficial properties of the hybrid organisms. Her research had identified several compounds that could be used to treat diseases that affected multiple species. The medical applications alone could justify the risks of continued research. As the third day of negotiations began, the Council started working on the details of implementation. The containment system would need to be installed on all human ships within 6 months. The Joint Research Institute would be established on a neutral world with representatives from all interested species. The agreement also included strict protocols for handling the biological material. All research would be conducted under international supervision, and any applications developed from the organisms would be shared with the galactic community. No species would be allowed to monopolize the discoveries for their own benefit. Ruan found herself at the center of a galactic breakthrough that could change the relationship between all species in the galaxy. Her simple proposal had transformed a crisis into an opportunity for cooperation and scientific advancement. The hybrid organisms that had threatened to end human space exploration were now being seen as a gift that could benefit everyone. The final agreement was signed by representatives from 35 species, with the remaining factions abstaining rather than opposing. The human space program would continue, but under new protocols that would ensure the safety of all worlds while allowing continued research and development. The Stellar Dawn would be the first ship to receive the new containment system and would serve as a model for other vessels. Min-ho's boots would be processed through the prototype chamber, and the results would be monitored by scientists from multiple species. As the negotiations concluded, Captain Nari felt a sense of relief and accomplishment. The crisis had been resolved through cooperation and compromise rather than conflict and isolation. The future of human space exploration was secure, and the galaxy would benefit from the accidental discovery that had started it all. 6 months had passed since the Great Boot Crisis, and the Stellar Dawn had become the most famous ship in the galaxy. Captain Taejin stood in the newly constructed biological processing chamber watching as the latest batch of samples was being analyzed by the Joint Research Team. The chamber hummed quietly as it separated and cataloged the microscopic life forms that had been collected during their most recent planetary mission. The transformation of the ship had been remarkable. What had once been a simple storage area for crew belongings was now a sophisticated laboratory staffed by scientists from 7 different species. The biological processing chamber took up an entire deck and was equipped with the most advanced containment and analysis equipment in the galaxy. Sergeant Minho walked through the chamber wearing his new regulation boots that had been specially designed to prevent biological contamination. The boots were made from advanced materials that could be easily sterilized and had built-in sensors that monitored for any signs of organism accumulation. They were not as comfortable as his old boots, but they were necessary for the safety of the galaxy. His original boots sat in a place of honor in the research lab, sealed in a transparent containment field. The hybrid organisms they had contained had led to some of the most important scientific discoveries in recent galactic history. Scientists from across the galaxy came to study the boots that had accidentally created a new form of life. Dr. Hai-1 had been promoted to head of the Human-Alien Biological Research Initiative and now supervised research teams on dozens of ships throughout the human fleet. Her work had led to breakthrough treatments for diseases that had plagued alien species for centuries. The hybrid organisms had provided genetic material that could be used to develop new medicines and agricultural techniques. The research institute that had been established on the neutral world of Haven Station was now the most important scientific facility in the galaxy. Scientists from over 50 species worked together to study the organisms that humans had been accidentally collecting for decades. The institute had become a symbol of cooperation between species that had once been suspicious of each other. Young scientist Ru-1 had been assigned to lead the technical development team, responsible for improving the biological processing systems. Her original design had been installed on every human ship in the fleet, and was being adapted for use by other species who wanted to conduct their own biological surveys. The processing chambers had revolutionized space exploration by allowing scientists to safely collect and study organisms from new worlds without risking contamination. The technology had been shared freely with all galactic species as part of the agreement that had resolved the crisis. Botanist Jiwoo had discovered that the hybrid organisms were not just scientific curiosities but practical solutions to real problems. Some of the organisms could clean up pollution and turn toxic waste into useful materials. Others could grow food in environments that had been considered uninhabitable. The applications seemed limitless. The agricultural applications alone had transformed food production across the galaxy. Desert worlds that had been barren for millions of years were now growing crops using techniques developed from the boot organisms. Frozen planets had been turned into greenhouse worlds where hybrid plants could survive in extreme conditions. Communications Officer So Young had been monitoring reports from across the galaxy about the success of the biological research program. The hybrid organisms had been used to restore damaged ecosystems and create new habitats for endangered species. The program had become one of the most successful international cooperation efforts in galactic history. Commander Taejin had been promoted to admiral and was now in charge of the entire human biological research fleet. His ships traveled to new worlds specifically to collect organisms for study while following strict protocols to prevent accidental contamination. The work that had once been done accidentally was now being conducted as a deliberate scientific mission. The success of the program had changed how humans were viewed by other species in the galaxy. Instead of being seen as dangerous contaminators, they were now regarded as valuable partners in scientific research. Human boots had become symbols of discovery and cooperation rather than threats to galactic security. Engineer Du Haiyan had been assigned to design the next generation of biological processing equipment that would be even more efficient and safe. His work was being used to retrofit older ships and develop new vessels, specifically designed for biological research missions. the Joint Research Institute had published hundreds of papers about the hybrid organisms and their applications. The work had advanced the understanding of evolution and genetics throughout the galaxy and had led to new theories about how life could adapt to different environments. Minho had become something of a celebrity throughout the galaxy as the man whose boots had changed galactic science forever. He gave lectures about the importance of environmental awareness and the need for cooperation between species. His message was that great discoveries could come from the most unexpected places. The story of the boot crisis had become required reading in schools throughout the galaxy. Students learned about how a simple mistake had led to one of the most important scientific breakthroughs in galactic history. The lesson was that problems could become opportunities if they were approached with cooperation and creativity. Dr. Kai once stood in her new laboratory on Haven Station looking at the latest samples that had been collected by the research fleet. Each sample represented a new piece of the puzzle about how life could adapt and evolve in different environments. The work that had started with Minho's boots had become a galactic mission to understand life itself. The biological processing chambers had become standard equipment on all ships that traveled between worlds. The technology had been adapted by many species who wanted to conduct their own research while following the safety protocols that had been developed after the crisis. As Admiral Tajin prepared for his next mission, he reflected on how much had changed since that day when the alien inspectors had discovered the contamination in his ship. What had seemed like a disaster had become the foundation for a new era of cooperation and discovery between species. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the most important discoveries came from the most unexpected places. The simple act of walking on alien worlds had become a contribution to galactic science and understanding. Human boots were no longer seen as a biohazard, but as tools for discovery and cooperation between species. The future looked bright as the research program continued to expand and discover new applications for the hybrid organisms. The crisis that had threatened to end human space exploration had instead opened up new possibilities for cooperation and scientific advancement that would benefit all species in the galaxy for generations to come.